Today we're going to talk about the finishing for the book for Queen Catherine's Sweet Bag Book and Pin Pillow. As you can see on the front of the book, we have applied gold pearl, and silver alizarin, and then we have chipping. So when you do that, you're going to take a piece of the, this is a piece of pearl, and you can see it's a flexible wire, but it stretches. And so the directions say to take the 6-inch piece and stretch it to 8 inches. When you pull it apart, you can see how it opens up the spaces in between the coils. If you stretch it too far, it's never going to go back down. So stretch it just the 8 inches. Then you take the book and you trim off the little bent ends. Whoops. Can you see the little bent end on that where I was grabbing it? So I'm going to go ahead and take a pair of metal cutting scissors and I'm going to trim that off. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to shape it to fit this. So it goes around here and it goes around here, and then you trim it. And as you stitch it down, it will conform to the shape. You can bend it a little bit with your fingers, kind of smooth it with your fingers so that it fits. Now the chipping in the center, right in the center here, you take your gold check pearl and your chipping box and your metal cutting scissors, and then you cut this into small pieces, about 2 to 3 millimeters long, and so they form little beads. And then just in random directions, you stitch these down on the front of the bag right here. And then after you have finished stitching those down and added the little paillettes here around the edges, either just stitched on their own or stitched with the a little tiny piece of the gilt check. You can see these two have lost their gilt check, where these right here have the little bit of gilt check. It's very fragile when you cut it into pieces, and it does tend to get grabbed and pulled out. So I leave that to you to decide what you want to do about that. But these are just stitched down. So you stitch those down, and then you're ready to go ahead and start your finishing. So you want to turn to page 28. Make sure that your linen is clean and straight. Cut the linen 1/2 inch outside of the back stitched line. Leave just 1/2 inch outside of the back stitched line. You take the pieces of comic board and you cut 4 that are 4 by 5.5 inches. So you have book front, book back, lining front, and lining back, and each of those are 4 by 5.5 inches and cut very accurately. Then you cut 4 that are 1 by 5.5 inches. So you've got the spine and the long side, and then you cut the lining pieces for the spine and the long side, and then you cut 4 more pieces for the sides, the short sides. These are 1 by 4 inches, and then you cut 2 for the lining. And I went ahead and labeled mine just so that I could make sure that I had all of them cut. Now you set aside 2 of each of them. So the ones that I have marked for the lining, I go ahead and I set those aside to be used later. After you have cut your pieces for the comic board, you want to check to make sure that it fits inside of your stitched piece. So if this was my stitched book cover, I would take my little board, my piece of comic board, and I would set it in. You want to set it in so that you can see the back stitch just along the edge on all 4 sides. This one is too long here and too long here. You want to make sure that you can actually see just barely that raw back stitch line, so when you fold it over, that the back stitching goes right along that fold. So I would go ahead and I would carefully trim off just a little tiny bit on these 2 edges. As you're doing your finishing, you may want to take a piece of tissue paper and just pin it over this section of your book. That way you're not going to snag any of the little pieces as you're doing your finishing. Take 3 of the pieces of the comic board that you've cut, the book front, the spine, and the book back, and lay them on the top of the stitched linen, and making sure that you leave a gap between the front and the spine of the book back so that you can bend your book, and then lace them across this way, making sure that along the edge you can see your back stitches around all 4 sides. And then after you have laced them, then you go ahead and take the short ends and you fold them in place and just pin them. Then take your remaining 3 pieces and place them on the back of the edge of the book. So you have the side, the spine or long side, and the other side here. So that's the order you put them in. And you lace across, trimming this as necessary so that they will go ahead and fit. So you've got your piece that looks like this. After you have that stitched into place, then you check and make sure that they fit together. So you've got short side, long side, short side, and this should fit right here up along the spine right here. Take your red ribbon, cut 2 12-inch pieces, and pin them about 1/2 inch in from the edge so that it's centered. One on that side. And one on the other side. You want to make sure that when your book is closed, your ribbons meet right at the center. And if not, then go ahead and adjust them. At the front of your book, laced like this, and you've got the page edges laced like this, then you go ahead and place them like this, fold this up, fold this, matching this to the spine of your book, pin it in place, and pin it in place around all 3 sides and matching the spine on the other side. And then you go ahead and whip stitch around this edge on all 3 sides in the spine. As you can see, I've stitched all the way around the back, and I'm just finishing that last section, fastening the spine to the pages of the book. Now I have used contrasting thread and I'm using exaggerated stitches. You're going to be catching back stitch and to the matching back stitch and using a matching thread so that your stitches will not be seen at all. So just go ahead and finish that right up to the edge right here. And then fasten off when you get to this last stitch here. You can go ahead and fasten it off and then bury your end underneath or on the inside. so you can bury your thread on the inside of your book so that you won't see it again. As you are whip stitching the page edges to the back of your and spine of your book, make sure that right about here you leave a little bit of a gap in your stitching so that you can put the Grecian braid in place when you get ready to finish that. After you've finished this step and you have the front and the back sewn, and so the page strip is right here, looks like this, then you go ahead and you take these cut pieces that you've cut and reserved for your lining and you test fit it. And so you make sure that this fits down into here. Because you have an extra piece of fabric colored comic board, it will not fit. So what you want to do is you want to take and you want to trim this so that the lining piece fits exactly down into the bottom. Then you take the piece for the front and you place it on here and make sure that it matches all the way around and right here along the spine. Then you go ahead and take your lining fabric, and on the book back you fold a 1/2 inch in, and then you lace back and forth this way and then back and forth this way, so you have a secured piece of lining. And then on the front you go ahead and you fold in a 1/2 inch on the top and bottom and just on this edge, and then on this edge you want to leave the extra fabric because this piece of lining fabric is cut slightly larger than the lining for the inside. And then you lace back and forth this way, catching just a couple of threads of fabric along here so that this stays securely in place. And on the front, if you're using matching thread like we are, then you really don't see these stitches right here. So you have this piece that extends out here. Go ahead and finish those. Take the bottom of your lining and slip it into the bottom of your box, and this one has been trimmed so that it fits in there nicely. Then take your pieces for your for here and you place all 4 of them in. What we're doing now is we are test fitting to make sure they fit. And see how this one bows out slightly? That means that because I have the extra fabric wrapping around, this one is slightly too long, so that I want to trim it so it's the right length. And I also want to trim it so that it does not stick up above the edge of the book here. Can you see how that sticks up above there? So you want to make sure that it fits just perfect in there and is just right along that edge. And when you have done that, then you go ahead and you take your long piece of lining fabric, you place the pieces on there, short, long, and then whip stitch the edges together in the matching thread. And then go ahead and slip that in again and test and make sure that it fits correctly. So this is right along the edge here. Then go ahead and you can pull those out and then pull the bottom out. Now take your lining piece, set it on the front of your book. Make sure that it fits, pin it into place, and then start whip stitching the back stitches along this edge to the lining piece here around. Again, I'm using a contrasting thread and larger stitches to catch the back stitches on the linen side and the fabric on the other side, and I'm going to work around all 3 sides, catching my ribbon as I go around. As you're doing this, make sure that you fold your ribbon down and you catch your back stitches on the linen side and your ribbon all the way through to the lining as you securely stitch your ribbon down. At this point, I have this stitched all the way around all three sides. Remember, mine are multicolor and very exaggerated, catching your ribbon in, but this edge is loose and it's just tucked down inside the back of the book. To form the lining of the inside of your book, take your piece that you've formed this way from the 4 pieces and the bottom piece that's been trimmed, put them together and then just whip stitch them to the bottom of the book from the outside, just enough to fasten it so that this won't shift when it's in the book. Once you've done that, then you take your book, take this lining box, and I put it in so that this part right here is in the corner here. You don't want to see it up there. So when it's in here, it'll be hidden. So you slide it into the book that way, and then you go ahead and you whip stitch the back stitches to the lining around here and around here, and don't fasten this edge to it here. And when you have done that, then you have your book fully lined. After your book is fully lined, you'll want to go ahead and put the Grecian braid around the edge of the book. One end, I have a little bit of tape on it, and I go ahead and I insert it into that opening that I've created here. And it's going to be thick, so you may have to take the tip of your scissors and just poke it down into that opening right there. After you've done that, then you want to take and start whip stitching it around the bottom of your book, across this edge, so your ribbon is on the page side, around here, along this spine part, and remember you're going to have the gold stitching along here, but it goes right underneath that. You go around the front of your book here, all the way back to where you came out. Go ahead and trim this off so that it's just a little bit longer. Put a piece of tape on it and then tuck it down into that hole, and then put a couple of stitches so that it meets right here very nicely. When you finish that, what you'll end up with is, my join is right here. Can you see I have a little bit of it? The opening is right there, but anywhere along here will work fine. And then your edges are here, worked in the long arm cross, and then the Grecian braid goes all the way around all the other edges of your book. And when you're through, then you just go ahead and take your ribbons and tie a bow, and that will finish your book. And here is the edge of the book with the bow tied, and this is how your finished book box is going to look.